Well, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to this budget workshop for our budget for 2021. Do we have to start with the pledge, or is this kind of just an informal thing? Might as well. Please rise. I'll start the pledge for everybody. So we're on the right side. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight is a budget workshop, which means the board will discuss their first thoughts and what they'd like to see or do with the rest of the budget. There is not public comment this evening. We're not going to take any questions and answers. So that being said, I'm going to start with a little message here for myself. As a budget officer, we were fortunate this year that our sales tax revenue has remained relatively stable. The county was predicting major downturns, but due to the fact that the value of our property in the town went up, our assessed new construction and a little bit of reassessment, our piece of the county pie got a little bit bigger, and so our share of the sales tax also went up proportionately. To date, I think we are down just about $15,000. We'll know more when we get our check for August, which we should get by the end of October. That's kind of going to be the barometer that almost everybody is waiting on. We are much more fortunate than other towns. Larger towns, Clifton Park, Half Moon, Thoreau, they're down $100,000, $200,000, so we are very fortunate to be where we are. That being said, we still have a couple of big hurdles to cross. We have a building that we need to put a new roof on and remediate some mold, and that is going to be a part of our consideration moving forward. I think generally we're in pretty good shape. We are looking obviously at all options for funding, and as anybody who runs a business is aware of, there's generally a couple of ways to make yourself more profitable. You either have to cut employees, which we did not do and do not intend to do, or you have to raise prices. We can't raise our prices terribly. We have a 2% cap that we are going to work very hard to stay under. I think that is doable. We also have to figure out a way for how we're going to budget for our improvements to Town Hall, the improvements that need to be made. So preliminarily, we have a rather large increase, but I think in the next couple of weeks, this board, along with working with the public and the budget committee, will be able to get that number to a figure that we can all live with. And like I said, nothing is off the table and everything is on the table. So we will listen to comments at public hearing from the public, and over the next few weeks, as I just said, the board will work together to try to come to a solution that works for just about everybody. So that being said, I'll open up the discussion to any of our board members who have their initial thoughts on this budget. And everybody has a microphone tonight since there's only 5 of us, so just pick it up, feel free to speak. Well, I'll start then. On page 8, I'm going to make a couple of changes. They're not big financial changes, they are just more of a clarification kind of thing. On page 8, under public safety, we have police, which we do not have, so I've asked our controller to consider changing that to B, let me remember right, 8664. It will be our inspectors, our part-time building and safety inspectors. And then the next item down also says police, B3620. That's actually, according to the controller's paperwork, the state controller's paperwork, we don't have a police force. We're going to change that to safety inspectors, which will be the building department and their employees. So that's just a change for paperwork, clarification kind of thing.
We're just changing the titles.
Yes. Well, changing the titles, and then one of them will be a different enumeration. On the special district side, the ambulance district has asked for a small increase. Ray Otten will be available at the public hearing to explain the small increase. All of these on the special districts are pass-throughs. So they don't really cost us.
Just as a quick clarification, Mr. Supervisor, the fire protection district is not a pass-through. That's actually a contract between the town and...
Right, but right.
That's just set by the 5-year... set by the 5-year contract that we have with the village. And the raise that was negotiated in that contract is
Right, a
shown.
couple years ago. Yes, you're correct. I'm sorry.
I think that went up to 409, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
On page 2, I had a question about reserve for repairs under the reserve funds. I spoke to the comptroller. There's $121,189 listed there. The thought there was it's a water-related project. Can we have further details on what that project is?
I don't. Is anybody else? Dave?
I think we could need to touch base with the town clerk's office to find the resolution that was adopted that established that reserve fund and show the date at which the reserve was established, the purpose for which it was established. With that information, you could bring other purpose or so that measure is something we could put in.
The information I looked up today was on cost of living increases, and the government is looking at a 1.3 cost of living adjustment for Social Security and salaries going forward. Like I said, I don't know if that's a number we're going to end up at. I would like to stay at the 2% if we could. We'll have to see how that goes. If anybody else has any thoughts on that, be willing to listen to them.
The budget also calls for somebody like just correct it out of the way, Dave, is on the stipends. We never put any yearly raise on stipends. The stipends are what they are. We never include the raises, so when you take those 2% off, like I'm planning and zoning.
What page is that on?
I don't have a page number, it's in the back here where it's listing all the salaries. So anything that's considered a stipend does not get the 2%, including mine and Jason's.
I don't have one in there.
I know it's not in there. I know it's not in there, but I want those removed, so just to clean it up.
Okay.
Where the salary zero was, but
Yeah.
On page 3, an assessment, what accounts for that, the large increase for a tentative of 2020?
I think it was part-time.
Okay.
There was a budget in there last year where so we didn't budget to include the amount necessary to pay for the data collectors. Personnel services in 2021.
Yeah, I think one of the main items that we're going to have questions on from the public at a later time is going to be this repairs that we're making to town hall. And you guys have your paperwork in front of you there on the second page. We are estimating the cost to be about $1 million. We won't know that actually until bids come in and things get approved. The debt service on that is going to be about $130,000 a year. We are estimating a 2.5% interest rate on that. Obviously, the longer we take it out, the lower the debt service would be, just be for a longer period of time. I have reached out to the firm in Glens Falls, Miller Mannix. They are going to come up with a proposal in the next week to 10 days for us, and we'll have a better idea on the numbers and what that would be.
Bond services have to be paid off.
Yes. And I reached out to them for an estimate on what that would be.
Hired somebody with a bid package together for it?
I'm sorry, Dave.
Hired and putting a bid package together for it?
We are looking at what the costs are going to be, yes.
Page 4, on your emergency preparedness, what's the $15,000 jump on contractual?
I believe Bill put that in there for to be more prepared for what may come down the road. We got, obviously no one saw this coming this year, and so we've kind of spent that budget. It's pretty much out to its limit. I think Bill is trying to be more prepared for either what may or may not come down the road next year or down the future. That's in his report.
On page 14, appropriations, capital projects fund, H1620 building, we have 200,000. Talked to the comptroller, it was stated that money had been transferred. Do we know what, or where that was transferred to? For what purpose?
It was just a budgetary oversight, I guess. There's another transfer, that's not even, the point two where you can transfer that's, it means that the town planners done, 200,000 for putting their capital outlay on capital projects on 2020. That's not any issuance of, or any expenditures that they made, for those types of purposes in 2020.
Just as a clarification, 200,000 has been taken out of this budget, right?
You're referring to the interfund transfer from the general fund to
Yeah.
the capital projects fund.
But we also had 200,000 that was initially in the preliminary budget that was taken back out, correct?
In a pre-tendered version, we had a 200,000 estimate to get transferred from the capital, or the general fund to the capital projects fund. The intent of that appropriation was to offset the amount of debt the town would need to issue to pay for the cost of the roof replacement and mobile remediation project. Like pointed out, the budget officers indicated that you prefer to finance the total cost of the project, which, you know, the debt service will be a little higher, but the impact won't be as significant to the taxes in the subsequent fiscal year.
I guess my question, Dave, getting rid of that 200,000 when we spend it on the project we have going right now, or we put it in a reserve account for major projects down the road, we really don't benefit anybody by not planning. And that's one of the things that we're not doing in this budget, is planning for the future. When I look at it, when I look at the 200,000, and that's the problem we've had for the last 20 years in this town, is we've always made these budgets so restrictive that we never plan for problems like we got today. We don't plan on anything in this buildings, we don't plan on anything with roofs leaking, we don't have anything set aside where we could take and have money set aside for repairs, basically. I think that's being very short-sighted in this budget. To be honest with you, and I guess I'll hit it right head on, Benny, in order for us to get down below the 2%, we've really got to take down this raise of 87 cents a thousand to almost nothing.
Oh, I know, that was a number that we put out there,
I
you
understand
know,
that.
to say what we needed to do, and now we can get to work and cut that number down.
But the problem with cutting that number is the same problem we've had before. We keep cutting back, cutting back, cutting back, and we don't plan for anything in the future. We've got a major air conditioning problem out here where we need to replace one of the air handlers here, and we're scratching to find money to do that because we don't budget for anything. When I look at it, and just to give you an idea, have we ever even considered what an 87 cent per thousand raise would mean to our taxpayer? If we take that 87 cents and the mean value of a house in the town of Milton is $260,000, if I multiply that out, the 260 by the 87 cents, we're looking at a tax bill that average taxpayer will pay about I think $218. What does $218 mean? That means that the average taxpayer in the town of Milton is getting all these services for under $1 a day. When we look at taking that down to, let's say, 66 cents, we're looking at only dropping that bill to about $172. So I think when we look at all these numbers and we look at, everybody, oh, it's big increases and it's 33% this and it's 66% that, it's everything else. Let's put it into the true numbers of what we're asking our taxpayer to do. We can't go year after year after year and not plan in a budget to take care of our facilities and to keep the services that the people could have grown to expect in this town.
I agree with you, John. On page 1 of the handout that Dave and I put together, you can see that the increase on a $200,000 house would be $42 a year.
Right.
So I agree with you, less than $1 a week. But we have to find a way to modify or explain or come up with a decent reason for that when people have been out of work. Last week there was a food drive at the parking lot, and they ended up with a traffic jam. They gave away all their food hours ahead of time. So people in the town are suffering too. And it's a fine line that we have to walk, and I'm not sure how, I'll be honest with you, John, I'm not sure how we're going to walk it. I understand what you're saying, that for years we have had traditionally low rates. And without creeping back up every year like we should have been doing, we didn't, and now we find ourselves where we are. So the 5 of us can put our heads together, figure out a way to come up with a unified statement that says, look, we realize times are tough, but we have to, you're right, we need to plan going forward. I'm not sure how it's going to sell. $1 a week doesn't sound like a whole lot to you or me, perhaps because we're fortunate enough to have jobs and we're working. But there may be people where that $50 a year or $42 a year or whatever number we come up with might be something they can't live with. What are we going to tell those people?
Well, I think we tell them honestly the predicament we're in. For years, we've been making budgets on what the political flag was flying in that particular year. You couldn't raise taxes because it's an election year. You can't raise taxes because people might not vote for us. I think people would rather we be honest with them and tell them, here's the predicament we're in, folks. Here's what it's going to cost you to have government in this town. And unfortunately, nobody likes taxes. I don't like taxes. There isn't a person sitting here that would jump up and down and say, I enjoy paying taxes. That's just a fact of life. When I look at our budget, and I've spent a lot of time going over this budget, and if you can tell me where the fluff is in this budget, that we could take out and not hurt services, and not get repairs done, and not get buildings fixed, I'd like to see it. Because I don't see a lot of fluff in this budget.
Well, I agree with you, John, and we can, like I said, the 5 of us look this over, see what we want to do, what we want to make some changes. We'll get together again and do this again in front of everybody and let the chips fall where they may. I can agree with you 100% that in the past things haven't gone the way they should have for whatever reasons. You're right, election year, don't vote for me, vote for them. We raised taxes, they didn't raise taxes. However you want to look at it. Sometimes the cold hard truth is just cold hard truth. Many, many years ago we were at $1.41 or $1.40 per thousand. If that line had just been held, we would, I guarantee you, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight. But to get back up to $1.41 is going to take us a couple of years. I probably won't see it happen under any of my terms. And if that's what happens, then that's what happens. But if that's what it takes to get the town righted and going in a good direction, John, then that's what we'll do. Anybody else? Well, do we want to sit here in silence for another 2.5 hours, or are we all okay with moving on and scheduling? I'll get a hold of everybody tomorrow and see when they want to reschedule another workshop, or do we just move straight to a public hearing?
I know we don't take public comment, but we got the whole budget committee here.
Well, the problem would be if I asked well, it wouldn't be a problem, I guess. I could, well, we kind of be breaking with tradition, but if you folks have any questions or comments, I guess since we're not overflowing with folks, we'll take a couple of minutes. If
I guess
anybody
I'd
has
just
any.
like to hear their thoughts.
I don't know if you're talking about fluffing,
Sharon, why don't you come up and use the microphone so folks at home can hear? I think Frank has the long one. You could back up a little bit.
real long.
He's got the long, yeah, you can go back.
Oh, there you go. Is it on?
Yes.
Part of my, when I went through some of the numbers in each department, what I tried to do, okay, what I tried to do was see what we actually spent, like in 2019, here were on these reports, and then look at what we're budgeting for 2021. Never mind what we did in 2020. Everybody else is looking at 2020 and just bumping it by 3% or whatever. We're not gonna necessarily spend all of what we had budgeted in 2020, from what I see. So if you look at what we spent in 2019 compared to, and I can give you some specifics.
Okay. Yes.
Oh, that's perfect. There we go. I thought you were going to have a big committee.
Take your time.
Payroll is payroll, I get that. We all know the people we already have, so that's pretty much set in stone. I would have thought we could get a little bit more information on contractual stuff though, if you can find a way to get that information out, because I don't know.
Dave and I will be digging into that this week.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so if we,
Basically, sharing contractual is things that we need to have.
I
National
know,
Grid.
see it, salt and sand,
Yes.
that's how I know the name. This is what Steve sent out today. If we look at, for instance, what we had budgeted in DB for all of our expenses, it was $2,953,832. We spent $2,687,000. Okay, that's, we didn't spend $266,000 in 2019. So I started going through line by line and seeing where did we have all this money set aside that we didn't spend? And seeing if we can follow those numbers over to 2021. And plug them in instead of the 2020 budget and then multiply it by whatever we did or adding them, make rounding it, whatever. So that was my one concern. The other thing I had was silly stuff like FICA and Medicare together are 7.65% of payroll. Why are we doing 7.9? Why did we budget 7.9? Every fund. We did that all across the board. I don't know. There's probably a reason.
It would have been off of, personnel services.
Yeah, I went through every one of them and I couldn't get it to match on anything. So anyway, if you go back and you look at what we really spent, I think we have a much fewer, I think we can have a much better budget. I think we can really cut some money out instead of worrying about what we have in our reserves. I mean, that money ends up going, I guess, to our reserve fund. And then we end up drawing it back out because we apparently plug in the revenue side a little bit of reserve. But if we just aren't spending it, let's just not spend it. I know the funds are nice to have built up like this, but not in this climate. So, I don't know, that's what I started doing. I started looking at everybody's budgets and what we really spent in 2019. That's it. Okay, just go.
Well, just as a quick one, Sharon.
Yeah.
When we looked at the 2.9 versus 2.6, that's roughly 300,000. We know
What is 2.9?
what they spent, what they budgeted in 2019, and they only spent 2.6.
Yes. Okay.
That means they had a particularly good winter.
Right.
If they had a particularly bad winter, they would have spent the 2.9 probably, or even more than 2.9. Just out of curiosity, and I know Jason or David can answer it for us, if we do one salt run around the town, what does that cost us?
10,000.
Just in materials,
Just material.
10,000, and any storm that gets at least 2 to 3 inches, it's gonna cost 2 rounds, because you're gonna have to make one before and after as it goes. So, and this is the frustrating part for us, is we spent a lot of time putting together our budget in preparation. Benny and Dave met with us. We have a budget committee, which I commend you guys for putting your time in. No one's asked us any questions at all. I've offered, nobody's asked. Other board members haven't asked. Also, the numbers you're referring to at the end of 2019, are the year-end books completely filed and done?
I thought they were even audited.
No, we haven't been audited.
So before you make any of those, let's make sure we have accurate numbers there as well. There could be some encumbrances that might not be in.
The numbers reflected on the, aren't the actual numbers. We have not closed out the books. I've said it before and I've offered, we keep a detailed record of every dollar spent in the highway department. So if you're speaking about the accounts to look at, I've said it for 15 years now. If anybody ever wants the numbers that we have a daily accounting of what's spent on the highway department.
Well,
And
then
John, you hit the nail on the head. It's very difficult to budget with Mother Nature. We can't predict that. Fortunately, we've always been able to turn money back in rather than not have enough money to do it. I understand what Mrs. Lacotte is saying. The problem is if we run out of money in the highway department, there is no more resources for the highway department.
Is that true?
You'll
That is
find,
true.
They can't come back and ask for more?
you'll find that there's a contingency line in the A and the B. If you look through, you'll realize there is not a contingency line in the highway fund. That contingency is basically your overflow in your other two funds. By law, there is no contingency in a highway department.
So let me ask you this.
Yep,
Suppose you do go over,
yep.
what are you gonna do, not pay your employees?
Actually, he becomes personally liable for anything that goes on. That's what really happens.
Yes. That's why we keep such a close eye on the numbers. Because, as John just said, if you get a blizzard that you don't plan for, the $100,000 that the town board has in the contingency would be gone within one storm. And there's no other resources to move to for the highway department. So that's why we plan for our worst event, our worst season that we had, and work from there, because we know, as far as material, how much we've used in the past and what the prices of the products are.
The cost of running the highway department, to give you also the idea, $100,000 in the highway department is probably similar to $1,000 in, let's say, a clerk's office or the business office in terms of what it costs us to do our job versus what it costs them to do their
That's why you
job.
have the
their own.
biggest piece of the pie.
Exactly, like I said, I mean, a normal little snowstorm of 4 to 5 inches could cost the town $20,000 plus labor to take care of that. So if anyone can actually tell us, we'd love to hear it, because we could pinpoint it if you can tell us exactly how much snow will have, and what the cost of oil will be, so we know how much blacktop actually will cost.
And I guarantee you, you'll be in high demand all over the country.
Well, the one benefit to having that type of reserve is you'll also notice over on our reserve funds, we have $600,000 set aside for a salt shed and fuel oil. That is money we don't have to go ask the taxpayers for and pay interest on to get those buildings built, because we've got that set aside already.
The
So that-
600,000.
Correct.
Yep.
And that's where a lot of this money went to, a lot of the overflow. So yeah, I do realize that there's a lot of overflow there, but it's there for a reason.
Yeah, I get that. I do, I understand that you want to have something just in case, you know? But I also think that we have to, you know, some of them are like, really, you come near spending that, and close, you know? And that has nothing to do with weather. I don't know whether something.
As a member of the Budget Committee, my approach is that I trust all of the departments to build their own budgets, come together, and I have full confidence in what the departments have suggested for the budgets this year. I have a couple of questions. This budget is going to include a debt service to the bond we're going to try to get to correct correct town halls, correct?
Correct.
Yes. And that's at about 150,000 or 250. Okay, right?
What's in the budget, I think we budgeted 150.
150. Okay, so that's a step forward in trying to get the town hall done, right?
Yes. Correct.
And then, John, you're suggesting we might want to increase in some other funds so that we could plan ahead and do other things.
Correct.
So you would be suggesting an increase this year, perhaps, somewhere along the line to get to where we would have some funds available for emergencies or stuff like that.
Correct.
So you would actually ask for an increase in
Well,
this budget?
I think when we had our last budget meeting, those numbers were already in there. They got taken out after our last budget meeting before the preliminary came.
Oh. So you're suggesting still that we might want to add more to the budget?
I'm just saying we might want to look at putting that back in the budget.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I think our preliminary number was up to like 99 cents per
Yeah,
thousand.
correct.
And then, to be honest with you, I talked about it with Dave, and I really thought if we're gonna go from 66 to 99, that was going to be a little bit tough for people to swallow. So we kind of looked at it and decided that we would knock it down to 87, which, you know, a 2% increase on 66 cents gets us about $45,000 a year for people who are wondering how much that actually turns up in the budget. It really is hardly anything. To stay under the cap would get us, you know, $45,000 a year, give or take a penny.
And the other thing is that under the appropriated fund balance, that's what we're chipping in from our reserves to make this balance out. You could consider increasing that to lower the tax load on the citizens. That's just a comment. That's not either way or the other. In other words, you have reserves in which the town itself could decide to add more money in. You could add that money more in and put back in the suggestion of increasing reserves. In other words, you could pay for it now by putting the money in the appropriated funds, and then just keep that line in it, and then you would have money in the future for some of the emergencies you might have. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Michael, come on up.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. I want to second what I think I heard Jim say. I think most residents of the town are comfortable that various departments working for the town are doing the best they can and in as efficient a way as they can. And in terms of the highway department, Jason and Dave, I think most everyone appreciates the fact that you cannot predict the weather and that you cannot know with certainty what you actually will spend over the course of the coming year. So, you know, having said that, from my side, as a member of the Budget Advisory Committee and as a resident and a taxpayer, I would simply be looking for the best estimate possible based on your experience and knowledge and budgeting for that. And for the town council, incorporating protection in the event that the highway department ends up having to be out 5 days a week for 3 months clearing snow. And I understand somewhat that there are these different funds and money has to be used in a particular fashion. I think, again, for me, even after looking at this stuff, talking with various people, including Dave Kramer, I still don't claim that I can explain exactly how money flows. And I think Sharon made the point that when we, citizens here, residents, are looking at some of these compilations of expenditures versus income, revenues, over the last several years, it appears there's been a significant excess in revenue. So for many of us, the question boils down to, is the town taking good care of surpluses when they come along in order to help protect against those years when there are likely to be deficits? And, you know, the fund balances, I think for many of us in the town, can seem high. And I know the Comptroller has explained that the state has some guidelines as to levels of the various fund balances and at what level are they appropriate. And, you know, to me, the good news as a resident and taxpayer is that the town seems to have fund balances that at the worst are okay and at the best are very healthy as judged by the state guidelines. And I think residents of the town support the idea of keeping the town finances in reasonably good shape. And along that line, I did want to ask Benny, I think there was a score released by the Comptroller's office on towns in this third quarter or something, and I didn't see the town of Milton's result, but at some point, if you have that, I think it would be good to share that with residents.
I haven't seen it yet either, Mike. But I'll
You're
look
not
for it.
going to see it until we file our year-end reports. which we haven't filed.
Yeah, our AUD needs to be filed to get that score.
This will
So the
stress-
numbers you're looking
Yes,
at are
that's
This
accurate.
will stress, the number, it should be more or less evaluated as a condition of our collective manner. And they would directly, the stakeholders and information out to.
Okay. So corollary to that, again, as a resident and taxpayer, I know a lot of progress has been made in terms of getting audited statements. Here we are into the fourth quarter of 2020. It seems like 2019 should be wrapped up and put to bed. So again, we would expect.
I agree with you, Mike, if we weren't on our fourth controller this year, and I know there's people that are gonna say that it doesn't matter, they're gonna snicker and sneer that it should be done. But, for the first 5 months of this year, we had 4 different people in the job. Okay, so we will be done by the end of the year, and then I know it's gonna be late, and people are gonna be angry with me for that. It was what it was, it is what it is, and we'll get it done. And when those numbers are ready, and our score is out, everyone will know what our score is.
And for whatever it's worth, I think people, residents who stop and think about the circumstances would grant leeway. So again, while I'm saying we're now in the fourth quarter of the year and we don't yet have 2019 wrapped up, the point I would really want to emphasize is I think it's incumbent on all of you and the Comptroller to make sure it is done as soon as reasonably possible. And again, you can explain that
And
to
we are working,
the residents.
we are
in whatever
working
fashion
towards that
you
goal.
want. I think those are the main points. I would ask the town council members to not only look at and think about the line-by-line items and the changes from one year to another, but also kind of big picture. I threw a question at the Comptroller earlier. There is a fair chunk of non-sales tax revenue projected for 2021 that to me is dependent upon the state. And with everything going on with the state, the question I would just ask you all to be sure and think about is what if the projected state dollars end up being only 85% or 90% of that budgeted amount? How will the town deal with that? Because to me, that's a real risk. And I think the town should be prepared to respond if that eventuality comes about. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the board?
Just as and I know, Mike, you said, I think it's only about 250,000 from the state?
Well, and initially, John, I had thought it was close to 800,000 looking back after.
Yes, most of that's mortgage tax, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, so taking that, it's more like 670,000 out of $1 million.
Yeah.
So it's, 2/3.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing nothing else, I guess we'll take a motion to adjourn, and I'll get hold of everybody tomorrow or Wednesday and see what works for a schedule to get back together. And we'll go over this again.
You need a motion?
I don't know, do we need a motion? It's just a workshop, right? So, all right. All right, thank you, everyone.